Thank you for having me. I'm sorry my coworker couldn't make it, so I'm going to try to go through it. We had it all separated, so we'll see how it goes. Just a quick, well, about us. Andrea, she's the one who can't be here, obviously. She's been working at Cisco for about 2 or 3 years, and a lot of her research is in this presentation, of course. And there's me. As mentioned, I worked with NASA about 5 years. I took a year off and went to Mandiant, went back and was their threat researcher, one of 2 threat researchers for the whole agency, which is crazy. I've done consulting for nonprofits in San Francisco, where I'm currently based, and I work for Cisco Umbrella, so previously OpenDNS, and get to play with a lot of DNS data every day. So, I'll give a quick summary of what I'll be talking about. We're going to talk about the kind of research that we do and how we find maliciousness, why we build visualizations, and I'll show some visualizations and some findings. So we research a lot of criminal activity like ransomware, spam, remote access Trojans, infected websites. When you get spam, you might get something like this email where you have Colette87 really wants you to click on this Russian website so you can meet her. And if you do, you get ransomware. We look at website compromises where iframes are injected into a website and it sends you off to other locations to install malware, do all sorts of things. Look at remote access Trojans, so malware on a system that allows an attacker to connect in and control the system, exfiltrate data, drop new malware, things like that. There's a lot of data to visualize, so we could look at an IP or a domain or a registrant. It builds up quickly. It depends on the kind of attack when you're looking at what you want to visualize. So compromised domains, it depends on the scope of it. Maybe it's just maybe it's a command shell, it's doing something bigger, or maybe it's just a simple compromised domain. Maybe it's just phishing, so it's a domain that's set up specifically for malicious activity, or it's a compromised website with phishing deep in the directory structure. Or DGAs, so you may have one complex domain name, and that doesn't give you much information, but the more you have, the better information you have. It depends on the infection method, so if it's a spam infecting users, that's one thing we're looking at. If it's just a simple compromise of a website, maybe you've got one indicator of compromise, but it doesn't give you a lot to go on. And exploit kits, maybe you're looking at sites that are compromised via exploit kits, which is a service where you can pay to compromise sites and try to compromise users depending on their vulnerabilities in their browser and their system. Also depends on the size and scale, so if, like I said, if it's just a defacement of a website, you don't have a lot, or if it's one DGA domain, one dynamically generated algorithm domain, it's not a lot to go with, but you can build off that. There's a lot of features you can get from even one IOC, one domain, in this case, magicpharmacyinc.su. See, there's this big spike in traffic compared to another domain when you have domain queries like this, where you see a regular traffic pattern that doesn't look suspicious. So finding maliciousness, you have to find all this stuff and then do stuff to it. But it's kind of difficult to find. But if you have a lot of DGAs, you can analyze a whole bunch of them. A lot of them won't be going anywhere. They won't be registered. They're NX domains. But you might be able to find one that is pointed to the command and control server and then get additional information on that. And the more DGAs you have, the more likely you can find out what it's attributed to as well. Here's an example of an infection where you might have a command and control contact and what you can get from that. So at layer 1 at the top, it's a system's infected, and then it contacts the CNC server. And if you have visibility into this, you get the CNC server, and you have the victim. And occasionally in obfuscation, there will be multiple proxy nodes that it will contact, so you can get those nodes as well, and you can build a data set on that, and you can keep on going, as you'll see. So you can get a larger amount of these changing DGA domains. You can get non-existent domains. They're not all registered, as I mentioned. One of these domains, maybe a few of them, will be pointed to an IP address. So a lot of this is using passive DNS, a lot of stuff I do. So I'm looking, like I said, at domain names. I'm looking at IP addresses, name servers, which is, we can get historical name server and who is information, which is important with GDPR. So you can see changes in that. And if you tie in other things, as I'll show, like virus total or threat grid, you can get add in malicious binaries and the relationships between IPs and domains and stuff. So using one example, just tracking hailstorm spam. Hailstorm spam is just a lot of spam sent out, a spam campaign done really fast before anti-spam mechanisms can catch up to it. Just looking at this one IP address, what can you get from this one thing? Using passive DNS, you can see that there are a lot of domains hosted at this IP, 857. There's also level 2 domains. There's 422. That's subdomain.domain.com, and you can keep on going down the chain of subdomains, and then you can get basically a list of that and do something with it. Just looking at a select example of that, you can see that there's a lot of domains that look like medical, Lucky Pill Mall, First Drug Mall. So they're probably pharma spam, which is attributed to one kind of ransomware that we've seen a bunch. Pivoting off that, you can take that IP address, which is on the lower right, and you can see that there's another domain that has been pointed to other IPs. So you can go look at those IPs and see where they've been pointing to. Basically, you're adding to your data set, and it's getting probably pretty overwhelming. You keep on going, you find more domains, more. Just to go on what you can get with one specific domain, the kind of things you can get before I get into the big stuff. You can see query volume if you have this kind of visibility. So you could do this in your environment looking at your DNS queries, or if you have access logs. You can also do it if you have something bigger like where I work. You can see the spike in traffic all of a sudden when there was very little, almost 0 to 1 queries per day, and then it drops down. You can get other things like the who is data I was talking about, IP addresses, the TTLs, so you can see if it's changing IP addresses often or if it's set for a while. You can pick up the popularity based on requester geolocation, so how many people are visiting from this country versus that country. And what's really interesting, which is something you could also do inside your own environment without third-party tools, but is more powerful with third-party tools, is co-occurring domains. So these are domains that where a DNS query was made right at the same time or just before or after the domain was queried. So then you can use that to branch out. Of course, this adds to your overall data that you're looking at still, so there's still a problem here. Collecting all this stuff, you still have to, I mean, when you have one domain, you still have to get this data somewhere. So we use a lot of open source intelligence, things like malwaretrafficanalysis.net, a blog by a security researcher who he publishes PCAPs, live malware, and a quick blog post on what he's seeing. And you can download this and play with it. It has things like, there's a PCAP right there, and I'll get into this shortly. You can, well, actually, I guess I'm getting into this now. You can download those PCAPs, you can run them, and you can look at the domains, but it's a lot easier if you program this in Python. You can batch process through tons of them at one time. So you end up with a list of domains, which is problematic in itself because it's a list of domains, and a lot of third parties will send you lists of domains, and there's legitimate things in there, and there's non-legitimate things, so you still have to weed out things and clean your data. There are other sources like My Online Security is one. I mean, there's a million sources out there, but you can scrape these, or you can go download things. If you're, as a security researcher, you get access to places like this DJA archive, which are closed off to the public, so that attackers can't see what you're working on. And then, of course, there's Virus Total, which is a really great repository for malware and other IOCs. If you are doing it for free, you can use an API. You can call it 4 times a minute, I believe. But if you're paying, you can do a lot more. So you can set up URL rules and hunt for a specific kind of activity, and then download all that stuff programmatically, which is what we do. We download hundreds of samples a day and maybe run them in a Cuckoo sandbox or run them through various systems to get additional information to look at. And we also look at feeds. So there are some feeds that are providing constantly changing IOCs. They're usually a little bit more up to date than the historical data that we're finding on virus total and malware traffic analysis. One example of a really great feed is John Bambanek. He runs a security company. I'm sure some of you have heard of him. He just runs all these malware samples every day. I think he actually might be stopping the feed pretty soon, I heard, but I'm not sure about that. But he publishes them as the malware families that they belong to, so you can quickly ingest that and work with it. So why visuals? I feel dumb asking this question. I mean, I know why visuals. I mean, I feel like it's extremely important to be able to see what you're looking at. But as you can see, just to go over it again, it's a lot of data that you're looking at, like a ton of data, and it's really hard to keep it in your mind what you're looking at. And you want to work fast. Threat hunting is, it moves really fast. You can't just sit and wait for something to change, because as you can see, a domain spikes up in a campaign and it's gone. So you need to turn that messy data into meaningful information that you can work with really fast and move on to the next thing and also go home and have a life. It also helps us quickly analyze threat data. This is a quote from Edward Tufte. Basically, it's kind of long-winded. He's a data visualization expert, a professor at Yale, I think. But he's basically saying, assessing the change and the dynamics and the cause of something helps you really understand it. So some visuals we like to use. Like I said, we program in Python. We've had some coworkers that work with R, but we convert them. I mean, R is fine, but we use Python. We throw it in pandas for data analysis. Sometimes use other tools. And then we have been playing a lot with D3, which is a JavaScript library, and it's a pain for me to work with. I'm always struggling with it, but the things I've gotten working have been satisfying, at least. So we will do some specific kinds of graphs, like force-directed graph. This is really great for networks. We'll do timelines of first seen queries versus domain queries. So this is the first time a system in your network contacts a domain, so versus the time it was registered. Also versus other things, other components of the domain. Timelines of domain queries, this is just the volume that you've seen before in some of the previous slides. Timelines of queries just from network captures and log files too. And then signature patterns built from queries, in network capture files. So I'm going to get into that. That's a little bit different and something I'm exploring. I've been exploring for about 2 weeks. An example of force-directed graphs, how you can take a list of domains and IPs and get something maybe useful. I mean, this is a mess to look at, but it gives you an idea of maybe where to go next. You have this IP address, and it's got a whole bunch of domains on it. So if this is something bad you saw happening, maybe you know where to go next. You have all these one-offs on the left side that maybe aren't as pressing. So, and while I'm talking about force-directed graphs, this isn't about this. This is a fantastic product. It's actually a free thing called Open Graffiti, made by one of my coworkers. He used to work at NVIDIA, so he's made this beautiful thing. This is an example of what Zeus, Game Over Zeus, looks like in one environment. So obviously you can really visualize things and then just look at it all day. Here's a video of what Mirai looks like a section of Mirai botnet. So you can do some really beautiful things. I'm sorry to show you that because we're going to go back to really boring looking visuals. But we can do, as I mentioned, the query timeline. So if you look at Google, you can see there's a pattern here. There's a Monday through Friday pattern. It's kind of normalized for North America in this graph, but it goes high up in the day and down in the evening, and the weekend is lower. So you can see there's nothing, basically nothing malicious here. I mean, it's google.com, but if you see this kind of pattern or other patterns that you recognize as not bad, then you can move on. And then doing pattern matching. So I'm going to talk about this towards the end, but I'm looking at PCAPs with specific kinds of activity and counting the times in between, trying to find if there's patterns involved. Kind of a different way of building signatures. So what makes a visual useful? We have some questions that we ask ourselves. What will make it clear? This is pretty obvious. It has a count. If it's a timeline, you know, how many and when did it happen? So in this case, we've got this graph here. The line, the blue line, is the query volume. So we can see that this domain, humoronoff.top, had a big spike, kind of, relatively big spike, and then it went down. It's still being used, but so if it was in a malware campaign or something, then it's probably something to look at. Am I putting it in the right context? So force-directed graphs, those are great for networks, terrible for timelines. So you got to make sure you put it in the right place. So you can. I was going to put some really ugly graphs here, but there wasn't a lot of time. Also, how can we reduce the visual clutter? So maybe we can combine domain names. So here we're looking at Google and the humoronoff.top domain in comparison, which is, can be useful. And looking at, we can assess change by looking at spikes and changes in traffic volume. So some visual examples of attack campaigns, just to give you an idea of where we're going. I'm going to talk about 3 different malware variations: Emotet, Hansator, and Trickbot. So Emotet is a spam malware. Spam is sent to victims, and it usually includes an attachment, like a Word document or something like that, or a link to a Word document, and if you run it and have macros enabled, it'll do all sorts of stuff. So grabbing just from malware traffic analysis, just from a bunch of PCAPs for a selected time period, we ended up with what you probably see in your daily job, domain lists and IPs, and it's the job of some poor analyst, which I have been before, to look at these IPs and domains and figure out which is bad. Someone higher up says block this, and you're like, I don't know if I should block all this, but you should definitely look at it. But there are domains in here that shouldn't be blocked, obviously, like ipinfo.io. These are just IP checks from the malware, maybe, trying to find out if it should infect you or find out where you are. So you need to do something else with this. If you put all these IPs and these domains that you just saw into a force-directed graph, you get this cool-looking graph that looks kind of like candy. I don't know. You can see that there's not a lot that sparks interest, except for there's one section where there's a few more connections. So maybe you could start there. You can check out what's there, and you could, in the stuff that we've written that we use, we can highlight the nodes. The red is the IP, the blue is the domains, and we can get some more information on that. We can click on that and go to further resources that we use. If we run those same domains through to create that kind of messy graph, and we enrich it with passive DNS data, so we include a whole bunch more stuff that wasn't in the initial file, and we turn the labels on, we can see that there are a couple IP addresses that are hosting domains associated with this, or have hosted domains. So there are some more places that are more interesting to look at. mykeeptake.xyz, we'll see that again in a few moments, but just keep that in mind. We can do some timelines on this kind of thing. So if I take, just the PCAPs from the Emotet, from one Emotet infection, just these 2 files right here, and I pull out the domains. So I've got this academia, I'm not going to try to say the names, this one here. I pull them out with my Python script, and I've got these 4 domains here that are interesting. I didn't pull the DNS queries, just the gets and the posts. I can put these on a timeline, which is a different way to look at a timeline. I put the dates the emails were received by victims, according to this blog post. So there's probably a lot more emails than this, but put those on a timeline. I put the domains, and you can see that there's 3 domains on the far left back in October, and then there's this one domain right there. So that this gives me a quick image of like psychedelicsociety.org.au is probably really associated with this, and the other ones, I mean, it's probably compromised or it's been set up just for this campaign right here. Those old ones are probably compromised, or I mean, they're not as important, but they are important. Looking at that Psychedelic Society page, you can see there's a spike in traffic all of a sudden, whereas before around it, there's pretty much nothing. I can see the first seen date is the date that was on my graph. Looking at those other domains, you can see that there's kind of consistent traffic. It's not as big. I can look using other tools like VirusTotal. I can find that there's some interesting URLs, and I can scrape these or pull them programmatically, which I do. Looking at just at the site, sometimes I do this a lot in threat analysis to see what's up. It's it's a site, whatever, but it's WordPress, which I am suspicious of. I could tell by those previous domain names. There's a WP admin directory, but I didn't take a screenshot of it. But going into one of those directories, you can see there's some spam inside this site. So the site's compromised, and it's being used in this campaign. As you can see, because of the PCAP, I mean, that's proof. But looking at all the emotet domains, I pulled like all of them for a huge amount of time. I can't remember the exact. But you can see that there's a pattern here. I mean, it's a mess, but you don't have to read all the domains. But you can see October had a huge spike in domains being used, kind of dipped down, and then up again. So this isn't relative of the entire internet. This is some PCAP files, but it's a place to start if you're hunting for something. So there's some patterns we can look at, and I've been talking about this a little bit. This is stuff I'm doing that's brand new. I'm just trying to play around a little bit, which is a big part of my job, and that's my favorite part, to play around. So I can get those PCAPs, and I can see that there's GET requests, and there's posts, and there's all sorts of cool data to play with, like these right here that you're seeing. There's GETs and posts to different IPs, different domains. I thought about maybe if I look at the times in between events. So malware traffic analysis is great because he provides these PCAPs that is just a specific moment in time where Emotet or Hansator or something is, or some other malware is infecting a system. So it's pretty consistent. So I was thinking if you can count the times in between, maybe there's a way to look at patterns. And then research further on will be more interesting because I hope to be able to run it on live traffic and maybe catch something interesting. But I'll keep working on that. But looking at it, I put it on a graph with matplotlib just to see what it looks like. These dots are just they represent, well, what I did was I took the times and I took away the time information and made it a unique number. Not to get too weird with it, but just to try to do a constant thing. So as I did that, I would plot it on this line. So the numbers don't really mean anything. It's just a visual for me to kind of to start with. I'm looking to see if there are patterns. So if I run a bunch of Emotet PCAPs, you can see that there's sort of a pattern. I mean, maybe. I haven't yet compared it to what's it like when you're viewing YouTube or viewing news websites. But you'll see when I get to Trickbot, there's a little bit more of a unique pattern. And I'm at Trickbot. So Trickbot is like a banking Trojan. Sent usually phishing links or phishing emails are sent to people to log into their fake bank. They think it's the real bank. And it's changed a little bit to have kind of a ransomware component too, but I won't go into that. So let's look at some graphs with this. So putting in a force-directed graph, we can see there are a few interesting things. These are the same kind of, we took a list just like we did for Emotet. We can look at the nodes of this. We can expand upon that. This is really pretty. It doesn't tell you a lot of information if you don't know the context, but you can see that there's something interesting to look at. So we turn the labels on and we enrich it even more. Actually, that last graph we enriched already, but with additional passive DNS information. But you enrich it even further and add the labels, you can get a lot more useful information. You can see that there's something, there are a couple probably bad hosting providers that are hosting a lot of these domains, so you can take action on that, whatever the action may be. Looking at timelines of this, just to give you what it looks like. Same thing, October, big, huge thing comparatively, and then some smaller bits. So. And then patterns, of course, I want to look at patterns. So this is running through a bunch, this is actually a video, it's showing a bunch of different Trickbots. You have these two times that things happen. So it's pretty unique. As I work on it, maybe I'll be able to catch Trickbot live. I mean, I'm not building the next snort or anything, but just playing around. Hansator, which is another kind of mouse spam. Look at this and see what we find. We've got timelines, kind of the same pattern again. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe this is a larger trend. Maybe if I look back at what I've been doing for the last year, if I can even remember, because you're always on a million things, I would maybe be able to see that there's like, maybe I just remember October was a hard month. I don't know. So putting this in a force-directed graph, same kind of thing. You get a lot more connections. This is a lot more interesting right here. And if we enrich that with extra data, the past domains and whatnot, we get some more stuff. And as we were researching this, we found that there were a lot of relationships. As you can probably guess, based on those timelines I showed you, a lot of relationships between the different campaigns. But we can see things like, this IP is hosting a whole bunch of these iffy or bad or known bad domains. There's that mykeeptake.xyz, which was in Emotet, which is also being used in this Hansator campaign. So now we know that's been raised up a little bit as something important that we need to focus on. Looking at patterns, just to kind of give an idea, it's definitely different than Emotet, definitely different than Trickbot, the PCAP pattern, but it's kind of interesting to see. And then the relationships between attack and infrastructure, I just mentioned this, but this is everything all tied together, all the static domains and IPs from Trickbot, Emotet, and Hansator that we looked at. You've got these outliers on the side, and those are interesting for sure, but you've got this huge amount of just working together. The domains are working together, and the IPs are working together. It's the same infrastructure. And when you're trying to find attribution for something, generally you find it based on the sharing of infrastructure and the reusing of domains and registration information. But it's just nice to see that. If you enrich that further, you can find a place to attack. And this is historical data, but there are ways to be up to speed with the present moment. And then I put these, just overlaid them. This is not a programmatic thing, but it will be when I'm continuing to work on this, and so is Andrea. So if you put the Hansator over Emotet, you can see there's a definite relationship between them. And Trickbot, it's not as much the same, but it's, Emotet and Hansator are mouse spam, and Trickbot behaves a little differently. So you expect some different results. This probably should have been back a little bit further, but you can, when I was talking about bringing data together to give you better visuals, but you could, I didn't want to put all those domains on one big huge timeline, but I bet I would see some query volume patterns, which would be very useful to see. Cool. Thank you.